Okay? I mean, it just does not follow. But again, reason has been thrown out the window. Nietzsche said truth is metaphor. He's rejecting absolute truth. Okay, heavy emphasis on tolerance, but in the end, they can't, they redefine tolerance. Instead of being freedom of religion and freedom of speech, tolerance is redefined as believing that all religions and all views are equally true, because there is no absolute truth, and all behavior is equally wholesome. Oh, and by the way, if you disagree with our view of tolerance, you're the cause of all the wars in history of mankind, all the problems, stuff like that. And since we want to bring about a peaceful age, we need to remove you. There's no place at the table for you intolerant ones. That, my friend, is intolerant. That is very... I had... Ellen Krasl was a Christian lady who ran for governor in Washington State. Her son was on the Human Rights Commission, and the Human Rights Council was just so anti-Christian to the max. And but Jim Krasl asked me to go. They were going to try to kick him. He was the last Christian left on a 12-person board representing the evangelical position. Everybody else were pro-homosexual, anti-Christians on the board, and they were trying to kick him off for being intolerant. And so he asked me to go and speak on his behalf and to represent the evangelical position. So like 20, 30 people stood up and said all the same, anti-Christian garbage, and a few Christians stood up and spoke. So finally, when I got up, everybody knew who I was. It's, hate crime Fernandes, because I love Jesus, and I'm the embodiment of the intolerant one, and so I just stood up. I said, I consider myself a tolerant man, and everybody started laughing. I had to wait for them to die down to stop laughing. I said, no, I'm serious. I consider myself a tolerant man. And I see 11 out of 12 people on this Human Rights Council that don't like my views, and I'm not asking for any of them to resign. Now what I'm asking is for this tolerant Human Rights Council to be 1/11th as tolerant as me, or 1/12th, whatever it is, the mathematicians could tell me later, to be 1/12th as tolerant as me, and allow the one guy on the board who represents my views, and by the way, the views of about 1 of every 3 people living in Kitsap County. Okay? And it worked pretty well, because right after that speech, things were going their way, but right after that little speech, not only did they not kick him off, but four ringleaders resigned and started their own organization. But in the name of tolerance, they don't even see that. In the name of tolerance, I once at one of their meetings, I gave a speech that without God there are no human rights. The whole basis for human rights is on the idea that all men are created equal. And because I quoted from the Declaration of Independence, one of the ladies on the Human Rights Council said, well, that document was written by a bunch of white Christian European males. And I was like, what's your point, lady? It's like, and that was her refutation. If it was written by white European Christian males, automatically we don't need to take it seriously. Automatically it's bigoted. That's intolerance. But that's what postmodernism, in the name of tolerance, is becoming the most tolerant belief system in the history of mankind. Now, they reject dichotomous thinking, breaking things down into, drawing lines, this or that, either or, true or false, right or wrong. Of course, if you're not a postmodernist, they think you should be. So they suffer from dichotomous thinking. So if you're not as tolerant as them, you need to be as tolerant. Well, that's dichotomous thinking. They reduce all authority to power. You see, authority is the right to be obeyed or believed. Why does everybody get quiet when Dr. Chittick talks? Because he's going to hit you with a stick if you're not listening? No. That was the 1940s way of education. I grew up in parochial schools, so some of it carried over into the 60s. But no, that's not power. That's authority. Okay? He has earned the right to be listened to because he has done his homework. Decades of homework. Okay? But when a dictator says, you will obey me or I will kill you and all your relatives, that is just pure ugly power in the worst sense of the term. Okay? They reduce all authority to power. Everything is a power play. So when the Gospels were written, the Da Vinci Code, a postmodern novel, when the Gospels were written, they were accepted in the Bible, and the Gnostic Gospels were rejected because the guys in positions of power didn't like the radical women's lib teachings of Gnosticism. Okay? Power. Everything is broken down to power. So power narratives, power stories are used instead of rational arguments. They argue we create our own reality through language, so language is just a power game itself, which is, I don't even want to go there. And through deconstruction, they try to replace the author or speaker's meaning with meaning from their own community. We talked about gay theology, liberation theology. And then political correctness, they can't tolerate any non-postmodernist, okay? We talked already about the refutation. Let me just close with just a couple points here. It's self-refuting at its core. I mean, if you throw reason out the window, then they can't really they're not justified in giving us a reason to be postmodern. Yet they do. They argue for it. They say we shouldn't use rational arguments, we should just tell stories. But even when Christian thinkers, guys who claim to be evangelical Christian thinkers, argue that Christianity ought to go postmodern, they read these 20-page papers that means the Evangelical Theological Society. Myself and other guys will raise our hands, they'll call on us. I'll say, you didn't tell me a story. You're telling me we're not supposed to have rational arguments, we're not supposed to rationally defend our views, we're just supposed to tell stories, but you had 20 pages of rational argumentation for that view. You sound like a modernist. Where's the story? Tell me a story, guys. I'm waiting to hear a story. So just to argue that postmodernism is true and we should just tell stories, you have to use reason. Again, postmodernism shoots itself in the foot. While proclaiming tolerance, they cannot tolerate any non-postmodernist. Once reason is abandoned, all that's left is shouting. That's why when you question some political leader, if he's a postmodernist, instead of refuting your views, they just try to attack the man. Okay? Postmodernism is a vehicle for angry people who hate tradition to attain positions of power to overturn tradition. Now, with this handout, when you deal with people, sometimes you're dealing with modernists, sometimes you're dealing with postmodernists. How do you know? You got to get to know them. What a bummer. We used to be able to just hand people tracts. Now we got to actually love them and get to know them and have lunch with them. But find out, when you're dealing with a modernist, you can use the four spiritual laws, rational argumentation. But with postmodernism, let me tell you, with postmodernism, and by the way, the Hebrew Old Testament was more, you taught truth, didn't throw out truth, but through creative, poetic language. Whereas the Greek language of the New Testament is more analytical, okay? More precise, more modernistic, if you will. Now keep in mind, Jesus said we have to worship Him in spirit and in truth. From the depths of our being with passion, okay? But also in truth, in accordance to the truth He's revealed. So the Hebrew Old Testament focuses on beauty, but it doesn't throw out truth. The New Testament focuses on truth, but it doesn't throw out the beauty of the gospel story. So when we're witnessing